Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's podcast where we will be discussing how best to fail at game development. My co host today will be Chris Payne.
Hello, nice to be here.
Hello, Chris. Good to see you. So, everyone, the concept for this episode is we're going to try and do a bit of a reversal. We're going to try and go through each level of game development and come up with the things that you can do best to fail at each level. So it's sort of so if you can know what the largest sort of obstacles are and some of the most dangerous mistakes, hopefully you should be able to avoid them in future. So that's the concept. I've split this up into the game concept. So that is before the game is actually started. The development cycle. So that's when you're actually making the game. The publishing and the going live of the game, and the follow up. So what to do after your game has gone live. Okay, and we will discuss each of these in detail. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, sounds fine to me.
Okay, and seeing as you, Chris, you have actually been through the entire process from beginning to end in different capacities, you really are going to be a wealth of knowledge here.
I hope so. It's an interesting one. I've worked on an awful lot of games, some of which, many of which were very successful, some of which never even saw the light of day. So that there's and at least some of which were released but weren't big hits. So I've got a variety of experiences to draw from.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so we're going to start with the game concept. So this is where you've got to actually decide what game you're going to actually end up making. Now, this is so. Chris, if you really wanted to really mess this up, what mistake would you make? What was what common mistakes do you think ail people?
I think probably the most common mistake is to try to make a game that is basically just like your favorite game. Um, so you're making something that already exists, and if you fail to differentiate that from all the stuff that's already out there, then people have no reason to buy it. If you want to make like a pixel platformer, for example, there are hundreds of those on Steam. Some of them, the best ones, all stand out for doing something unique, either having sort of like something unique about the art, or something unique about the gameplay, or some gimmick that makes them a little bit different. But there are an awful lot that are just pixel platformers and don't seem to have anything unusual. And I think that makes it a very difficult sell, because then you're basically trying to sell something that is very similar to stuff that's already out there.
See, this is interesting because this is sort of kind of and not directly the opposite of what my first thoughts were. And because my first thoughts was is make something that nobody wants. So basically, you've got, if you were to, because the core thing about the game concept is this is what's going to be, you want to read the market. You want to know sort of supply and demand. What isn't there enough of, and what will people buy? Because you're making a huge gamble at this point of, does anybody want this game, and are they going to be willing to split with cash in order to hand it to you? And so I've creating a game that nobody wants, or what yours is creating the game that people already have, or is
Yes,
sort of and better.
that's a better way of phrasing it. Yeah,
It's sort of like, because it's so yeah, I always see this as a straight up marketing sort of supply and demand. Is there enough supply of these things, and is there enough demand?
The one corollary to that I would add is that because this is a creative field, it's not your classic supply and demand situation of identifying a need that you can fulfill, because at the end of the day, nobody particularly needs video games, but they want them because people like to be entertained and like they enjoy those experiences. So it's not so much trying to the risk of creating someone that no one wants is to a certain extent, you do want to create something that people don't know that they want, but then you've got to explain to them why they do want it. So ideally, you want to present something with people with something that they've never seen before, so it feels like new and fresh, and then tell them exactly why it's going to be worth their time. So there are a few examples of games that are that have a USP that really makes them unique and appealing, and without that USP, they would be a lot more bland. Sorry, unique selling point for people not familiar with the marketing jargon.
I think I almost feel like just by using unique selling point, you've sort of hit on it. If you want to do one thing in order to fail in the concept stage of a computer game, it's have no USP. Is and what I think is interesting is kind of what is needed by USP, because when you were saying creating a game that is already, you don't want to create a game that's already out there. There is kind of actually I mean, if you think of the Fast and the Furious sort of film franchise, or any of these ones where it's basically the same film, like over and over and over again, there is this concept of, I actually had it in Makeup, of newness, of like all you need, it's people will like burn through games and then they will go out and buy something incredibly similar. Like I for my sins, I love tower defense games, and I will just, there's a mobile tower defense one, I've forgotten what it's called, but I will buy every one they do, and it is fundamentally exactly the same game over and over again, with slightly different skins, slightly different towers, slightly different, and that is enough to get me to part with £2 or £3 as and all I need is a little bit of difference to sort of maintain my interest. So
that's a good point, though, because that sounds like you are part of their existing audience, so they are selling you basically a slight upgrade to a familiar experience, which is a slightly different proposition to finding a new audience. And I think that if you've got an established audience, that is a bit of an easier sell. This is why the big publishers like EA and Ubisoft and so on are focused on creating big franchises. Once you've created a Call of Duty or an Assassin's Creed, you can keep producing games as part of that franchise, and you are basically taking an existing market and then selling something that is slightly tweaked to the same customers, and that's very different to finding a completely new market. So the original Assassin's Creed is a more interesting example, because they were creating an IP from scratch with that, and it wasn't. You could argue that it wasn't really until the second game that it actually found its feet, because the first game had a slightly weaker storyline and some of the mechanics weren't quite as well developed. Like a lot of the core, ironically, a lot of the DNA was there. No pun intended. but it didn't really come together until the second story, when they knew what they were making, and they could make the storyline really sing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of. I think it's a difficult. I think you can definitely. I think this is one of the things. I suppose at the concept phase, I mean, the main thing that you could do to fail is almost commit to a game concept without finding anyone who is excited about your USP.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that would that would be similar to not having a USP at all, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's the thing is if you come up with a USP, because you can come up with lots and lots of USPs, and
That's
then
true.
you can't communicate it to somebody, and they can't go. It's like I could do uh, Mario, but with oh god, everything's been done. Welsh people. It's like, I mean,
That would interesting. You should mention that. We'll come back to that later. I will. I mean, I've got a good example is Dark Souls. Essentially, like all of the Souls-like games are basically sort of like action RPGs. There are a lot of action RPGs. The thing that makes the Souls games stand out is the punishing difficulty and the way that that difficulty is baked into the game design, so that even saving your game has a risk reward element associated with it. That is an interesting USP. It's not one that I would have thought would be a big draw, to be honest. But it turns out it's huge. People really love it, because we were in a phase where a lot of games had become kind of hard to fail at, because it would auto save your progress at every 30 seconds or so, and you never really lost any progress, and if you kept plugging away, you would get through it. And we'd kind of moved away from that kind of game design that was driven by the coin-op model, where it was punishing difficulty that was designed to make you sort of like fail repeatedly but feel like you could get through, so you would keep putting coins in the machine. And the in the modern context, the Souls games, basically by being really really tough, they've created this kind of like badge of honor thing. I can't play them. I just don't have the patience or the reactions to get through those games properly. I'm fascinated by the lore. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are lots of other elements of the Souls games that are absolutely top notch, like the storylines, the world, the whole design of the world and the bosses is fantastic. The art is really nicely done. The implementation in places, there's a few bits are a little bit clunky compared to some AAA games, but the overall experience, because the art is good, the bosses are good, the gameplay is really solid, it creates an overall package that people really really enjoy.